Hello everybody, I just suddenly realised I was going to start this video clip and I haven't put my my red apron on as we used at the Big One show at Farnborough, and when I had all the family there, which was brilliant fun. William, Richard, Hannah, Margot and everybody came, and I'd like to thank everybody that turned up for that show. It was really good fun. It's the first show I've done for a while. So what are we going to talk about in these clips? Well, the idea is I haven't done a proper clip now for about 5 months, and I've had lots of emails with people asking me, oh John, you know, when are you going to do another clip? And obviously what I don't want to do is sort of do overkill and have too much flood of information out there on social media, and that is something which I'll come on to a bit later within these clips. So there's going to be 3 clips. The first one today that we're shooting is going to be, I suppose, entitled Real Bait. As you know, I'm passionate about all my bait and all my fishing, but in particular real food. So this section that we're going to do today, I'll also be making some hook baits using real bait as opposed to inorganic materials such as silicone pop-ups or plastic hook baits, which I know people do use because often there's crayfish problems, that sort of thing. But we're speaking about that. Then the second clip, which will probably be shown 1 week later, will be on tactics on the bankside, results, comparing your results to others, and social media. And the final one will be my 2 best recipes. So I often get asked, you know, John, what are your best recipes? What do you recommend for the summer? So that's what we're going to be doing. So we'll kick straight off with the first section here, talking about real food, talking about real food baits. And I think one of the sort of enduring questions that I get asked, you know, when people say, oh, you know, I've been looking at your podcasts, you know, the Cooler one in particular, the Carp casts, Carpology, all those various little bits of media that I've done over the last 2 years, because I've been only been doing this for a couple of years, and they said, oh, I haven't got time to make bait. And I hear this regularly. I've never made bait before and I haven't got time anyway, so I just use a pop-up mix and glug it, over flavour it, or use something straight out of a bag. Fine. But actually it's not fine, because if you go carp fishing or spend any meaningful time on the bank at all, then you could utilise a small proportion of the time that you spend fishing and spend at least 1 hour a week making bait. And everyone has time to do that, even if you've got, you know, very little facilities at home, even if you live in a flat, something like that. You're bound to have a friend, someone's house you can go to, or somewhere where you can do a 1 egg mix. So we will be doing a 1 egg mix in this clip, in the second part of this clip, and it takes less than an hour to make upwards of 80 hook baits. And that's using real food, not a pop-up mix, not a non-food mix, real ingredients, real food. And in actual fact, this sounds a bit weird with all the flavours that I sell and have extolled the virtue of blending flavours and all the rest of it. But if the base mix is really good, you virtually don't need any flavour, which is why it's so important when you do make your own hook baits at home, even if it's just hook baits only, that you get the dose rate right. And there are going to be a few people that have seen these clips before, and they'll say, oh, he keeps going on about this. I'm going to keep going on about it every single time I do a clip, because it is so important. You will get bites using over-flavoured hook baits, but the active and effective life of your bait will be shorter and shorter and shorter the stronger the bait that you use. And so in the old days, what we used to do is keep switching flavours, and even that has its time because the fish will wise up to it. So we'll move on to making the quantum leap, let's call it a quantum leap, from using a bait where you perhaps don't even know what the ingredients are. You're relying on the bait company that you're getting it from using good ingredients. Well, I'm sure most of them do, but it just depends on what proportion that they use those ingredients in. They can say that it's got fish meals, fish extracts, hydrolyzed proteins, all these different things within the bait, but how much is really in it? It could be 5%, 7%, 10%. So you have to get the proportions right. And lots of people have been asking me as well, well, John, you know, I have used other people's baits, I have used other people's base mixes, including yours, but now I want to have a go at making my own. And I do help everybody that sends me emails asking about designing their own base mix. And so whilst we're on about real bait, I will say this now. Got a feeling I may be repeating myself, but what does cyprinoids need? So barbel and carp, for example, are omnivores. They require pretty much the same spread of nutrients that they each need the same spread of nutrients. That's the point I'm trying to make. So you're looking at in feeding weather, so for 6 months of the year, from say May right through to, well, October, November now, they can quite happily tolerate 35 to 40% protein, particularly early in the season. So however that protein is derived in your bait, it could be protein derived from fish meals, that's sea proteins, any type of sea proteins, which would include, you know, the tuna proteins, the shellfish proteins, the mussel proteins, any of those. That's seafood related. It could include meat proteins, meat and bone extracts, chicken proteins. It could include liver, any of those, and it could include milk proteins. Obviously, the same quality of protein isn't quite available in vegetables, but you can certainly use a lot of vegetable protein to supplement the content of the bait and the vitamin and mineral profile. For example, you'd be using hemp protein, a brilliant ingredient, or you'd be using a little bit of kelp meal packed with vitamins and minerals. You only need that in a small proportion. Small amount of spirulina, usually not more than 1%. That's a single-celled algae. That's a good ingredient. But what we don't want to be doing in a base mix, if we can avoid it, is to try and avoid that fashionable thing where you put everything in it all at the same time and loads of liquids afterwards as well. I think the watchword here is to, for those people that are making their own base mix, to get the 35-40% protein content, the 40 to 50% carbohydrate content, and around 8 to 12%, 12% being the maximum, oil content. And the oil content is going to be partially derived from some of the ingredients, which will have a higher oil content than others. For example, full fat soya flour, quite high in oil. It's also a very digestible oil, so I rate full fat heat treated soya flour as a good ingredient, but not more than about 7 to 10%. Don't need much more than that within a recipe. I could, of course, talk to you for an hour about how to get the profile of the base mix right, but I think thinking about the emails that I've had and thinking about what people struggle with most of all is they love to make their own base mix recipes up, but the problem is that people are adding too much of everything. So it's too much spices, too much extract, too much peppers, too much of everything. Then in addition, there's loads of liquid foods going in, all the hydrolysates, extracts, you name it. You know, whether you go and get it from a specialist bait supplier or you go to a local supermarket, a Malaysian wholesale place and buy balachen or any of the oyster extracts and put all those in, you end up with a bait that's got everything in it because you can buy it on the internet. Much better to use a balanced base mix and a subtle flavour level and an extract level. So by all means, add those things in, but don't add too much. Make sure you get the actual base mix right in the first place, because that is what the fish will come back to time and time again. So in the second part, I said I do tactics and results. So we'll talk a little bit more about those tactics and results. But before we go on to part two, I think it's fair to say that for those people who use a hair rig and have got a lot of time to sit behind the rods, then the carp are going to come along and you'll catch them eventually, because you're using a trap rig. It's a trap rig, it's a snare rig, a hair rig. You know, don't get me wrong, I use it, it's a fantastic tactic. But what they will come back to, especially if you fish one venue on a regular basis, is a balanced recipe put in the right place and in the same place or places, areas of the lake, confidence areas. Before I've spoken about creating little miniature bird tables on the bed of the lake, and the fish will remember it and they'll come back to it. Why? Because they want the bait itself. And there are some out there who say, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just boilies, it's, you know, it's all the same ingredients. It isn't the same ingredients, because if it's a good bait, you probably only need about 20% of what you would normally use if you were to buy another type of bait and employ a different type of tactic. So if you are in control of your own recipe, perhaps using some of my base mix and ingredients and the experience that I've gained, believe me guys, I've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. So let me pass this legacy on to you. I haven't done a clip for 6 months, almost 6 months now, and in these next 3 clips, they're possibly going to be the most important ones I've done, because it will really be the truth, it will be reality, hence the name of this clip, Real Bait. I want to help people. I want people to remember what they've done, write it down, stick to it, use the same bait on all rods. Then you can gauge and measure whether what you are doing really works. And you know, I'm getting emails from Germany, Spain, France, the Netherlands, even, well, the Russian ones have stopped a bit lately, funny that. But people are asking me the same questions. Doesn't matter what country they come from, because carp behave in the same way wherever they are. And even if you're fishing a highly pressured commercial venue in France that sees every bait you can think of, believe me, I can tell you now, from being a fishery owner myself and speaking to people who own their own fisheries in France, they're sending divers into the lake at the peak of the season, and there's boilies on the bottom of commercial fisheries going rotten because they're not being eaten. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? So that's a controversial bit to finish on, this first little section of part 1, but we'll stop it there for the moment whilst I fire up the kettle and then get my saucepan, get some water on the boil, and I'm going to do a 1 egg hook bait mix and show you exactly how I do it and how easy it is to do. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so we're back to part 2. I'm going to put some of these gloves on, finish my coffee. If you can get access or purchase some of these online, they're quite good because you can still feel sort of what you're doing in between. Actually, I do prefer not to use any gloves at all, because then you can get a better feel for when you're making the hook baits, particularly if you're using cork balls or cork granules and you're making perfect hook baits. So You can actually do this, as I mentioned in the first section. You know, you don't need a lot of equipment for this. So you just need a cooking stove, which you would normally have in the bivvy. So you can do all this in the bivvy. All you need to do is make sure you take a little wire basket. So what I'm going to do is I've partially boiled the water during the gap in between doing these clips, so it's quite warm, and I'll fire this up in a minute. Been deciding on what base mix to use, and I'm going to use Taste. So Taste is good. With June the 16th coming around the corner, you can use this for barbel or carp. As I said earlier, they're both omnivores, and they both have the same, those species have the same dietary requirements. They certainly do not need high oil content pellets, but then you've heard me bang on about that before, so we won't say any more about that in this clip. 1 egg. So we're not weighing the powder. We're going to use the same size egg and the same measurement of flavour in order to determine the strength of the finished boilie. And whether you're doing a 1 egg mix, a 6 egg mix, 12 egg mix, or any number of eggs you want, the equation remains the same. So in real time, we'll crack that egg in there. And I need a fork. William, can you just pass me a fork from there? Thank you. Give that a brief mix around. So bearing in mind that these are hook baits only, you can slightly increase the volume of flavour that you are using in a hook bait mix, and you can use a bit more than you would normally use in a mix designed for free offerings. So I'm going to get my trusty 1mm syringe out, and I'm going to use a flavour blend in this, but it's a flavour blend where you don't need to use 2 bottles because I've already done it for you. This is a flavour called ASM. It's great for carp, great for barbel. It was actually developed mainly for barbel, but obviously carp love it too. And you think, well, what does ASM stand for? What does it smell like? Well, it's a blend. AS stands for alisalar, and the M stands for musspice. So this is a blend of alisalar and musspice. The only thing I'm not going to say is exactly what that blend is, because that's a secret. So we've got a 1 egg mix, we've got a 1mm syringe, and into that I think I'm going to put a double blend. So not just this ASM, I'm going to use roast chicken as well. So I'm going to use 0.5 of 1mm. 0.5, that's half a mil. If I was making paste, there it is, half a mil. If I was making paste, I'd use half as much again. Sorry, half the amount. So I'd be using 0.2 or 0.3 of a mil. Because you're not boiling paste, so you don't want to be using too strong. This roast chicken flavour, I use it in my bait nearly all the time. I blend it with ASM or alisalar together as the same bait in Taste Mix. It is absolutely incredible. And it's got all the correct aroma ingredients in it, and it just, well, literally, those that have used it will tell you how accurate it smells. And fish absolutely love it. So I'm going to go for half a mil. There it is. Half a mil of each in there. Make sure I put the lid back on, because one thing's for sure, you don't want to be spilling it. So in theory, you'd think, well, you know, that's got 2 ingredients, it's already incredibly complex, but it's actually got 3 ingredients. But that's 3 flavours. Within those flavours, each one of them has around about 25 to 30 ingredients. So for those that are technically minded, the aroma ingredients that go together to make up one flavour, there's about at least 60, between, I'd say 55 to 60 ingredients, individual aroma ingredients, just gone in that mix. And that's going to add a whole different level of complexity to your bait and is quite impossible to copy. So for the few people that want to go to this trouble, and hey, it isn't much trouble, you're using something that no one else is doing. So we'll give that a brief mix. You can further boost this mix, which I do because I think it's a phenomenal ingredient, and the taste is incredible too. So the mix is called Taste, but this gloopy stuff that's in here is liquid yeast complex. So this is all derived from Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and I'll read what it says on the packet. It says a unique blend of prebiotic yeast fractions derived by enzyme action via Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Rich in B vitamins, beta-glucans and nucleotides, it supports gut function in carp and barbel, improves fish's immune system, and it's about 40% protein. It tastes absolutely delicious. It looks and smells a little bit like Marmite. It isn't Marmite, it's a hydrolyzed yeast. And we're going to put to that 1 egg mix just about 1/3 of a teaspoon. Doesn't really need any more than that. So that's us ready to go. The yeast sort of helps to turn the eggs a little bit brownish. We'll give that a brief mix. Now comes the delicate bit. Now comes the bit where I get asked most of the questions. How much powder? Well, it's got to be until you feel that it's about right, because don't forget, and I've measured this all before on previous clips, depends whether you're using small eggs, large eggs, medium eggs, extra large eggs. So we'll put some of this in, and this hookbait mix has been sieved, so it's a finer quality, and it's got egg albumin added to it, so it will make nice hard hookbaits. So we'll get it going by putting a little bit in to begin with to get the feel of it, and this is where it's important to get your hands into the mix and to get the feel of it exactly right. Certainly doesn't take much powder for 1 egg. I've done it a few times before, so I've got a good idea of roughly what texture it takes. This is smelling absolutely incredible right now. So I can feel that with my fingers. It's a bit way off yet, so a light dusting on the top. You can see I've just dusted a bit more on there, and the mark of a good base mix is it doesn't go too sticky and it comes away from the edge of the bowl quite easily to make a nice sort of clean end holding paste. And you get the feel of it in your hands. Base mix everywhere. This is coming together nicely. And you know, when you do this, the confidence that it gives you is just incredible. A little bit more powder scattered over the top. And that's coming together now. So we've reached a critical point. And the critical point is, as soon as the mix starts to come together like this, and you can see now it's not sticking to my gloves. In fact, I'm going to take these off for demonstration purposes, pick it up, and you can see, you can't smell it, but I can, and you can see that it's got the consistency of soft Play-Doh. At this stage, and for making these hook baits, I'm going to just put a tiny little bit more on there, and it's a very small amount, and now I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it on the work surface there, and my hands really don't have anything sticking on them at all, and I'm going to use 12mm cork balls. These make quite big pop-ups, I sell 12mm cork balls in little bags or 10mm. Probably 10mm are the most popular, but you'll certainly get a decent pop-up if you're using a decent size pop-up if you're using 12mm. No equipment for this, no machinery, no nothing. And what I'm also going to do with this is I will hold this up a bit closer to the camera, and William is going to try and get that focused in for us so we can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to kick it off by pulling just a little bit of paste off. This needs to possibly just stand a bit longer whilst the powders absorb the egg and liquid, but for the purposes of this clip we haven't got all day, so we'll just see how this goes. Cork ball, and you can see what I'm doing. Hopefully that's fairly clear. Is that coming through clear, Wills?
Yeah, come a bit closer.
Come a bit closer, you can see how much paste is going around that cork ball. And then you're gently rolling it. Now what I do is I carry on doing these. Here we go, here's another one. And oops, that one hasn't got quite so much paste around it. I need to put a bit more on, so I'll just stick a bit more on there. And the texture is so good on this mix, it really does stick to the dry cork balls. So we'll roll a few more, and it's important to practice because, oh, you know, it didn't go right. It felt like the cork ball wasn't really attached to the paste, didn't really seem to work as well as I thought. And you know, all this is practice. So we'll roll that again. You can get the feel of it, that feel to get that nice shine on the outside of the bait is so important. And when you're doing this, with all the options that you've got on a few flavours, particularly if you buy yourselves the little pick and mix flavours, which are ideal if you're making just hook baits only, then you can do your own blends and play to your heart's content, making whatever you want. So I'm going to roll that one. That's 4 I've done. Now I've done 4, they're quite big hook baits because I've used 12mm cork balls, and I'm going to fire up the water. That's going to a certain extent to spoil the sound, so what we'll do is we'll have a little break for a minute. We'll switch the camera off whilst the water comes up to a boil, and then we'll see where we are. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, so you can see the water's really on the boil here. Hasn't taken long to get it going. I've done what I call the first roll of these hook baits, and I've let them to stand for 5 minutes. I've done 21 hook baits. Obviously there isn't time to do the whole thing, but making big hook baits like this, you probably get 50, maybe 40 at least anyway. No, I'll go 50. You get 50 out of one egg of these big baits. So obviously if you did a 10mm cork ball, you're going to likely to get 70 or 80. The more buoyant you want them, you put a little bit of less paste round. So what I do, and we'll put the wire basket in, what I do is I roll them twice. So I put 2 in my hand and I roll them again. 2 in my hand, roll them again. And the purpose of this is, and I've taken those blue gloves off, is to get the feel and the compression of the paste around the hook bait, and just to get that sheen on the boilies because I don't want to be putting any glugs or dips on these afterwards. I've got the flavour level spot on. I know that half a mil of each of those two flavours will work, and this purpose of double rolling certainly doesn't take long. Here we go, 21 baits in 10 minutes. And the last one, 21. So we'll pick these up carefully. And I've got a clock behind me with batteries in it. We'll put all those in, just coming up to past. So because they're quite big boilies, I think I'm going to boil those for 90 seconds. And then we'll dry them out. We'll make sure that we dry them out properly before we use them or freeze them. You can, if you want to, sort of agitate them around, sort of gently do them with a spoon or a fork, making sure they're sort of cooked all the way round. And we've got a nice ball of paste left here, which we can put in a bit of cling film, or we can roll up separately whilst we're waiting for this to happen and just make some sinkers. Fantastic smell. So that's a minute, 1 minute. So after these have dried off, they'll start to tighten down and they'll go a bit smaller in diameter as they harden off. 10 seconds to go. Every one of these baits, 100% confidence. Wonderful, look at that. So that's 10 minutes work with some big visual pop-ups made with Taste hookbait mix. There it is. Taste hookbait mix. ASM flavour. There it is. And the deadly roast chicken. And a little bit of liquid yeast complex. I will be featuring this recipe and talking a little bit more about it later on, because this in various forms is without doubt one of my best ever recipes. So we'll move on, and we'll move on to boiling versus steaming. We'll change the camera around and I'll talk to you in a minute about that, because I get lots of emails about that too. See you in a second. Hello everybody. So Lily, my little Jack Russell, is just wants to be on camera. She's helping me with this last finishing up of part one that I mentioned earlier on. We've done our hook baits, and Lily wants to eat them, of course, which is why she's come into the bait workshop. I'll put her down a minute. She's going balmy. I'd just like to speak about two things just to conclude this. Number one is powdered egg versus real egg. I researched powdered egg back in 1976, and I bought this little book called The Manual of Nutrition. This was published, I think, in about 1978, which is when I started the first ever bait company in England. And very interesting things on vitamins, minerals and proteins, amino acids, all sorts of things. Probably one of the best little books ever written for people that want to understand about nutrition. And a lot of this applies to bait. So, a lot of bait companies and a lot of people are asking me, you know, I'm being told to use powdered egg, that it's better for the carp, it's easier for them to digest, etc, etc. So those that know me will know that I don't like mincing my words, but I've never heard such a load of rubbish. I mean, basically, if powdered egg was so good, athletes would eat it instead of real egg, but they don't. Top athletes will consume, particularly weightlifters and powerlifters and real impact sportsmen, will eat half a dozen eggs a day or more. A 5-egg omelette for breakfast is nothing for a top athlete. And the reason being is that it's the pure ingredient. So the only reason why a lot of people are saying, oh, you know, powdered egg is better, has got nothing to do with the digestion of carb, nothing whatsoever. The fact is that it's cheaper and it's easier to use when you're making a boilie mix in a big factory and then selling it. So that's done. I've done that. Fresh eggs is best, and that's what all the serious anglers use. We'll now come on to steaming as opposed to boiling. Again, if you're going to steam bait, it takes much longer for this type of bait, a boilie, which has been designed to be boiled. It takes longer to render it usable if you're going to steam it. Therefore, you're cooking it more. But the temperature of steam and the temperature of water is about the same, 100 degrees Celsius. So carry on boiling them, because what will happen is you'll only need to boil the average 16mm boilie for about a minute, providing the recipe's of good quality and it's got all the normal hardening agents in it, which will reduce the boiling time. So I'm getting lots of emails about this, powdered eggs and steaming or boiling. Just boil your bait, it's absolutely fine. And you'll find that an awful lot of ready-made baits, pre-made baits, factory-made baits, they're very hard. And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is, I think most of them are boiled, but also, which is fine, but also they're boiled too long. So they've had whatever nutrition is in them boiled right out of them. So only the very middle part of the boilie, if it has any decent nutrition content at all, contains the nutritional bit. The outside part of it is of minimal attraction. So rock hard commercial boilies, sorry guys to all you guys that sell them, yeah, the carp will eat them okay, but they're nowhere near as good as fresh bait. And if you really want the Rolls Royce of hook baits, then you use one of those with a cork ball or cork granules, or just a normal bottom bait with a thin film, a very thin film, the thinnest film you can get of paste wrapped around it, which hasn't been boiled. And that is my tip for this first clip. Perfection is paste wrapped around the boilie, made fresh within the last few days. And if you make a batch of paste like this and a batch of boilies like this for hook baits or sinkers, in a fridge without freezing them, they'll last at least a week. So you can make the bait the week before and fish with it fresh on the weekend. I'll catch up with you on the next clip, where we're going to be talking about tactics, results and social media. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Talk to you soon.